Welcome to Aspire, and I Have the Right To podcast, where we amplify voices, share stories, and drive change in the fight against sexual assault. We explore the critical issues surrounding student safety, institutional accountability, and survivor empowerment. In every episode, our goal is to provide insightful conversations with survivors, experts, educators, and advocates, giving you, our listener, valuable information, resources, and actionable steps to create safer environments and cultivate a culture of respect and consent. It is remarkable to be back with my team, with Hugh and Gabriel. We've had a little bit of a break with a lot of moving parts going on. My two co-hosts finishing up an academic year, and myself making a move across the Pacific Ocean, to Japan. So many thanks to my co-host for waking up early this morning so we could do a podcast during my evening in Tokyo. But most of all, I would like to thank our guest today, Chris McGhee. I will let Chris introduce himself, but I want to acknowledge that this is going to be an interesting episode. I think it's going to be an informative one. I think it's going to be an emotional one. And I think it's going to be a very open and honest one. Chris is a dad, an amazing father, obviously a working professional. He is now an advocate. He is an ass kicker. He takes no prisoners in terms of moving issues forward. And Chris, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself. And thank you for joining us today.
Well, Alex, thank you for having me. Good morning to everyone. Happy to be here. I am Chris McGhee. I'm a regular old dad that's living in the suburbs of York, Pennsylvania. I'm married. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and I like motorcycles and I like cigars. I'm just kind of a regular old dad. But in the year 2022, my wife and I learned that our daughter had been raped by a classmate when she was a freshman in high school. And that kind of began a bit of a spiral, if you will, of PTSD for her. And as she and my wife and I were kind of coming to terms with what she had experienced, and she was not comfortable pressing charges, and but the PTSD was pretty severe, and she had a suicide attempt, and so we got her into therapy, and we were doing all the things that concerned parents should be doing when they have a child that is in crisis like that. So one of the things that we tried to do, in addition to therapy, was also getting her involved in some community service, to surround her with people that are trying to make the world a better place. And so we were fortunate to get connected with the York City Police Department here, who are conducting community walks. And we met a student resource officer, and who was obviously skilled at working with young people and with students, and wanted to help and wanted to mentor Grace, and really impressed upon my wife and I how much he cared and wanted to help Grace through this time. And so he began a friendship with Grace and myself and my wife, and told us all the things that we wanted to hear. And eventually he sexually assaulted my daughter, who was 15 when it began. And when we later learned of this, and we, with our daughter's support, we pressed charges. And after a year and a half, he received a plea deal to a misdemeanor charge, corruption of a minor, and he received no jail time. He received no mandatory registration on the National Database of Sex Offenders, and he was able to walk home, just leave the courtroom that day. And that was kind of a seminal moment for me, that no family should have to experience that, to actually watch this predator be charged with hurting their child and then getting to see them walk out of the courtroom. So I committed to myself that I was going to change the law that allowed that to happen. And unfortunately, with a very, very quick Google search, I found out that was a very common plea in the state of Pennsylvania for law enforcement who hurt children. So I just began a journey of working with the lawmakers here in Pennsylvania to close that loophole. And just this week, as a matter of fact, the bill was passed unanimously by the House of Representatives. And yesterday afternoon, it was signed into law by Governor Josh Shapiro. And we are celebrating, but getting ready for the next fight, because quite frankly, we have a responsibility, and there's too many kids that no one is speaking up for, and we need to take on this fight and keep pushing forward.
Well, first, I just want to say, Chris, thank you so much for everything that you shared, and I'm so sorry to you and your entire family, and especially your daughter, for everything that you guys and she's went through. It's really awful that this happens and this type of thing was allowed under this law, and that the perpetrator got away so easily. But now that the law has been passed and you've kind of went through that legal step through law, what do you think is really that next step to break it down culturally, let's say, in the law enforcement area? Because there's obviously a culture there that has allowed that to happen and not had other consequences take place for that police officer or for that SRO to take place. Instead, it would just kind of stop at that legal level. So what type of actions do you think needs to take place, or what leadership should be in place to really stop it at that cultural level?
So in our case, I have to be very clear about something. The York City Police Department was incredibly supportive of our family. The night we learned of what happened, my wife called the police commissioner that night, probably around midnight, and within 2 hours, we had two detectives in our kitchen talking through what happened and taking statements. And so we had their full support, but the reality is that is not typical. Not all police departments are going to be as supportive of what happened as the York City Police Department was. What needs to happen? I quite frankly, I think we simply need to have we need to have more of these conversations. We need to be having more awareness around the issue of sexual assault, of grooming. Parents have got to lean in to these conversations. Look, nobody wants to have these discussions. This is not exactly fun stuff to talk about, but the alternative is even less pleasant. And by proactively bringing awareness to this issue and talking about some of the signs of grooming behavior, we have the potential to actually begin to bring about change and eventually some of those addressing some of those cultural norms that are unfortunately just so pervasive today.
Wow, Chris, what a story. Thank you for that. I really appreciated all the emotion that was packed into that, and you being so open and honest about your experience and what you've had to fight through, as well as everything that your daughter has had to go through in terms of the law and her personal feelings toward this matter, and how everyone shut it down almost, even at not only at that personal level, but at this legal level. It's sad to see that the criminal justice system hasn't taken action against these perpetrators. There's a statistic that says that sexual assault survivors actually don't come through with what they've been through, or some don't come through for around 50 years, or don't even tell anyone and keep quiet about it. I think that comes from a lack of support as well, and the stigma around these conversations. How did you take such a tragic event and really pick yourself off your feet to say that this is something that needs to change? How did you take tragedy and turn it into progress?
I think it really comes down to I had to acknowledge the reality that as a white male, I have privilege, and people listened to us. And the reality is that most district attorneys don't take up these cases. So often when these cases are brought to police departments, they shut it down. We were able to press charges. We had support. We actually got a conviction. As lame as that conviction was, there were charges that were given, and he received. He pled guilty to. But it all kind of speaks to this mentality of our culture is putting so much of this on the victims, and we minimize. And the common theme or that common question of, well, what were you wearing, or how much did you have to drink, or that sort of thing. Those questions are subconsciously putting responsibility on the victim, and our society too often is accepting of those questions and accepting of placing blame on the victim. I have a responsibility to every child, every survivor, every victim that nobody listened to. There was no celebration at the end of our case, right? He walked out of the courtroom with no jail time for sexually assaulting my child. You literally will get a more severe punishment for stealing a car than a police officer who sexually assaults a child in the state of Pennsylvania. And that is simply unacceptable. And it, quite frankly, it's a reflection of the culture that says, well, it's a shame, but we're going to give him a misdemeanor charge. The culture allows too much responsibility on victims. The culture allows minimizing the crime and what the victim has to go through and experience. And I was not okay with that. I simply I wasn't going to go for that, and I guess that was that's really what sparked this for me, and bringing about some change. Plus, quite honestly, it was also very healing for me to go through this journey and be of service.
So I think it's quite remarkable, Chris, the resilience, the strength of your entire family to, how you responded to all of this. But I want to go one or two layers back or deeper in terms of telling our audience what was there, because as as Hugh mentioned, so many victims remain silent, right? And so many people deal with this with a sense of shame and silence around this, and not wanting to bring these conversations out in the open. But I want to rewind things to what were the elements that existed within your family, number one, that allowed your wonderful, amazing daughter, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, but what was around in the McGhee family that allowed your daughter to speak up, which allowed the family to sort of build this support system that then you could launch and do the incredible things you've done since. But what were the things that were important that might be good advice for families that might be going through something similar to this?
You know, quite honestly, Alex, there is always a sense of betrayal in these sorts of situations, right? So, Alex, you and Susan entrusted the school to take care of Chessie and to be watching out for her. And when they didn't do that, you felt betrayed. There was anger there. Obviously, there was anger towards her rapist, but there was anger on how the system failed her. And for us, there was fury over the system that was supposed to protect her, right? He's a police officer. He's an SRO. I mean, we specifically went to this guy to help her as she was dealing with a rape by a classmate. And for him to use that information and use that as part of the grooming process, it was just simply anger. And so the knowing that if it happened to us, it's happening to other people, and as much as we did not feel much justice with the charges and the misdemeanor charge, there's a lot more people who are seeing even less from the system. So Grace was right from the get-go saw the absurdity of this, and there was that initial fear of, I don't want to tell mom and dad about what happened because they're going to think less of me and I'm going to get in trouble and all of these things. But then once it was out in the open and we were letting her know, no, this is not your fault. This is absolutely 100% the responsibility of this predator who did this to you, that manipulated you, and quite frankly manipulated us. We have to make sure that nobody else has to go through this. So when you have this much rage coursing through you have a choice to make. Am I going to hold on to this and let it destroy me and consume me, or am I going to do something with it? Am I going to channel this fury and do something positive? And look, it was anything but easy, but we all knew it was the right thing to do, and in the end, quite frankly, it coming out and fighting for this to become law was incredibly cathartic for Grace, for my wife and I to bring about some change. So, I guess really, Alex, it just comes down to making a decision to use that anger into something positive.
And just a quick sort of follow-up comment there, Chris, because having gotten to get to know you and Grace and your wife, the one thing I will interject here that I witnessed in action was love, care, and support. And I think, obviously from especially a dad's perspective, that rage and that fury is at the top. But what I saw immediately with you and your family was that rage was floating on a foundation of love, care, and support, which I have to think, helped guide that energy that you were describing into productive, constructive ways instead of the very possible destructive avenues it could have taken. But talk to me, if you can, about that, what sort of helped guide that rage into, and that power into a constructive way, because I think this is what a lot of men struggle with. And obviously our podcast is trying to help bring these conversations from men to the light of day about, unwinding a lot of things that we're taught in terms of the ways that we're allowed to behave. And there is absolutely a trope of dads of survivors, right? Because our first instincts are to destroy something. But I saw something different with your family.
So it's kind of interesting when very, very soon after the final hearing, I actually reached out to I Have the Right To, and here are some parents that have used their family's tragedy to create something, and I didn't know what to do. I have all this swimming around in my head and my anger. And so I reached out to the organization, hoping that maybe I could connect with somebody from the Prout family. And lo and behold, like an hour later, Alex, you and I are exchanging emails and eventually talking. And one of the first times that you and I spoke, you had shared with me your condolences. You said, I'm so sorry about what happened to you and your family. And if you ever find yourself in this sort of a situation and you tell people about what happened to the family, there is this look of horror, this look of shock, and no one knows how to respond to this sort of thing, right? So you say, "Oh my Lord, I am so sorry about what happened," and it's very well intentioned, but it can often feel kind of meaningless. And Alex, when you and I spoke, and you said the same thing, it landed very, very differently, and there was a feeling of, I get it. And I had not really begun my advocacy journey at that point. I was just kind of looking for some support. And so, Alex, you and I talked about this, and you offered to continue the conversation, and we got to speak more. But there was that moment where I realized I've got to do something with this, because I can't allow this anger to eat me up. and I have to do something with it because I cannot let this define the McGhee family. So that's kind of where so much of it began for me is that awareness. Yep, this sucks. This is not a club that we want to be in, but here we are. All right, now what are we going to do about it? And so I felt this need to do something to help, but also to show Gracie I got her back, and I can't change what happened, and I feel so terrible. I mean, the guilt was pretty intense. I literally served my child up to this monster. That's not something that, as a parent, you let go of very easily. So, okay, what am I going to do with that? And how do I show Grace that this is never going to happen again? And I'm going to demonstrate that commitment and do something about it. And so it was to help others, but it was also a way that I could show my daughter, rather than that tired trope of well, if it was my daughter, I'd go put a bullet in his head. Well, here's the truth: you're not in that situation, and thank God you're not. It's really easy for dads and moms to say, well, if it was my kid, you're not in that situation. And when parents when anyone makes that statement of if it was my kid, what you're doing is you're backing that parent into a corner. If you really loved your kid, you'd go get a gun. You would go exact some revenge. And that parent is already in crisis. That parent is already dealing with horrors that you can only imagine. And now you're gonna basically dare them. Yeah, if you really care, you're gonna go play vigilante, and that's simply not helpful. And it contributes to that culture of misogyny that we're going to go ahead and protect you, sweet little thing. You just go ahead and take a seat in the background, and we'll fix this. And it's not helpful.
Thank you for that as well. And I know Alex has talked about this as well, how the first initial response he had to his daughter's assault was, anger, and what do I do? And it was all I, right? And like you talked about just now with, if it were my kid, I would do this. I would respond violently. And what people forget about, although they feel that they're trying to protect, their loved ones, is that for some reason the protection turns into, this is my problem rather than my daughter's problem. And I think that also contributes to like this idea of dominance that many men have, and that many men, have in this culture, and feel the need to keep either consciously or subconsciously. And I think that phrase is somewhat subconscious, like, there is like, yes, I'm protecting my daughter, but also like, forget about her. It's, I'm going to be the one to respond violently. So how do you see this issue, bringing more awareness to victims? How can we do that in a culture where, many sexual assault survivors are mostly women, and that's a statistic. It's just a fact that we've had to face. But why is it that many men have taken this upon, themselves, or men of survivors or fathers of survivors, close ones of survivors, have turned the victim into the one responsible. What were you wearing that night? How much did you drink? And I'm going to be the one to kill whoever did this to you. So how can we bring more attention to the victim while also supporting them in, the most efficient or the best way? Like you have acted as a good or a perfect example of the balance of support and love. Yet many have lacked that, I feel.
So, again, going back to that first conversation with Alex, and that was a really important conversation with me, because that was, Alex, you were the first other dad that I got to speak to. And so all of a sudden I felt validated. I felt heard. I felt seen. And I got some perspective, right? So Alex was obviously, you were much, much further along in the journey than we were at that point. And when I was sharing my anger, and again, speaking with another parent, it lands very differently. And so I'm sharing that, and Alex was listening to me and validating that. But Alex also reminded me, every decision that he and Susan had to make when it came to dealing with this, they had to ask themselves, is it helpful to Chessie? Is it going to benefit Chessie in finding a resolution to this and helping her along her path of healing? And I had to think long and hard about that. Going out and playing tough guy is not in the victim's best interest. It's in the long term, absolutely not, because it opens up all sorts of other issues, and it takes the focus off of your child or your loved one. So that was a really critical moment for me to realize that. The other thing that is so important to realize is sexual assault, at its very essence, is about a loss of control for the victim. They are something is being done to them, and that control, they have no control at that point. And sometimes as parents, we feel it's our job to step in and take control. All right, I got it from here. I'm going to go fix this situation. And while it is well-intentioned and it's rooted in love, and it doesn't matter whether or not you're a parent, if you're an uncle, grandparent, simply it's someone that you care about, you want to fix things. And in this sort of a situation, it's not about you taking control. It's not about you feeling better and saying, well, I got that guy. I took care of this situation. See, honey, I came through and I fixed this. It's not about you, and it's about your child. It's about your loved one. That is the most important person at this point. And so all decisions, all of your behaviors really need to go through that lens of, is this in the best interest of my child? Everything that we did, from pressing charges to reaching out to the media, to begin working with our state lawmakers to change the law, Grace had to be on board with all of it. And as much work as I did on fighting for the law, Grace was involved with it. She went up to Harrisburg, to the state capitol with me to meet with lawmakers, to be involved with it. She had to be part of it. And so I can't just say, well, I'm the dad, I'm going to go fix this. It's not about me. And that's what is so critical, that as parents, we have to step back and we have to allow our child or our loved one to be part of this decision and give them the space. They may not be ready. They may not be ready to come forward. They may not be ready to go to law enforcement or go to the hospital, to confront anyone, to seek help. They have got to come to those decisions themselves. We certainly want to be there and provide resources, but we want to provide that space and not work on our own agenda and what we think needs to happen.
I just want to go, but thank you so much for that, Chris. And kind of just going off of that, I just want to go back to something you said earlier to your daughter when you said this is not your fault to your daughter. I think that's one statement that is often, that I've learned, that is really the one main statement to say to a survivor after they've just experienced this horrible thing, to really make them feel seen and make them feel heard. And I feel like often many parents are in this situation where they want to support their loved one after this terrible thing just happened to them, and they know they're supposed to love them and support them and care for them, but they're often at a loss of words or just try to coddle them and say, oh, it's okay, but often that can actually push the victim and the survivor away. So I would ask you, what are some, let's say, specific things that you said, like, this is not your fault, to your daughter, for her to be able to really get that trust back that other families or loved ones of survivors can really learn? Because sometimes there is bombarded, oh, love them, make them feel supported, validate, but what are some specific ways, I would say, because you don't want them to say one bad thing that could actually turn into a whole negative spiral, but you always want to kind of push up the victim and make them feel better.
Yeah, here's the reality. It's not okay. And what you don't want to say is, oh, it's going to be okay. They're not okay. What has happened to them, it was a crime. And so that needs to be validated. Here's the reality. Here's the truth of the matter. I didn't do everything right. When Grace first came to us, when she was raped by a classmate, my initial reaction was, okay, wait a minute. I needed information. I was asking questions because I needed to make sure. And I got to tell you, I am deeply ashamed about that. My first reaction was not to believe my daughter. And believe me, I don't forget about that. So when I was adequately informed of what happened, and I say that with absolute sarcasm, but when I felt that I had enough information that I was ready to believe her, then we started working on, okay, what can we do? Do you want to press charges? Do we need to go to the hospital? What not? How can we help? But there was that moment there where I had to make sure that I believed her. Now, I can never go back and change that. I have to own that. I made a mistake, and parents make mistakes. When we raise kids, we don't do everything right. But you know what we do? We try to do better. And a lot of times as parents, we make a mistake and we don't want to admit it because we don't want to let our kid know that we made a mistake, because that's going to tell our kid that that we made a mistake, and then we're not going to look perfect in their eyes. Hey, guess what? Your kids know that you're not perfect. Your kids know that you make mistakes. But the message you send to your kid when you say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I'm going to do better, is you're modeling the behavior that you want from your kid. When we learned of the assault by this police officer, I was not going to get it wrong. I was not going to get it wrong the second time around. And specifically to your question, what did I say? I said, I am sorry. I am so sorry for what has happened to you. And immediately Grace is trying to explain things that almost like she was worried she was about to get in trouble. And a 28-year-old man, there is no situation where it is okay for a 28-year-old man to sexually assault a 15-year-old child. There's just no way around it that you could say, well, okay, in this situation, no, not okay. And so what I had to do was validate along the way that none of this was okay. Let's be clear. These were criminal acts. And so I had to continually validate that what she experienced was wrong, it was unacceptable, and I have her back. And I had to make sure that my actions matched my words, that I was not just saying these things. I had to demonstrate that to her. And so providing her space to grieve about what happened, and providing her space to vent her anger about what happened to her, without reacting, without taking it personal, but ultimately keeping her very involved along throughout the entire process of everything, whether it was the case and legal decisions, or working with the media, or in the advocacy work. She had to be involved in all of it, because at the heart of this, while what happened impacted all of us, and at the very essence, at the center of it all, is Grace.
And Chris, I can't tell you how proud I am of Grace and how much admiration I have for you and your wife. And I haven't had the pleasure of meeting your other two girls, but I can imagine what the family unit is like, and how tough a journey it's been, obviously. And we mirror our, not only do we mirror ourselves in terms of the family construct, right, being the father of three girls, but as you mentioned, everything you said to me, it hit me at my core, because it was something that, we went through as a family. And obviously then you can extrapolate that to, what every family goes through, which you hope activates people into that feeling of responsibility, you talked about. But also at the core is Grace's grace and strength. What an appropriate name for your daughter. And I remember the first time I met her, it was very new to her, and she was processing everything. And it's just been amazing to see her, on the journey over the last couple of years. And I hope she's doing well now, and please give her our family's sort of love and regards. But I want to talk a little bit about a wake-up call for dads, right? And I don't want to take it in the context of because something terrible might happen to your daughter, right? In terms of our lived experience. And frankly, there are too many dads because there's tens of millions of survivors of sexual violence in the United States. But I want to find ways that we can activate men, activate fathers, activate caring people about understanding the scale and scope of this problem, and not so much picking up the pieces afterwards, but how do we create a culture of understanding, a culture of respect, a culture of understanding what consent is and what it means. And unfortunately, a lot of it is messaging to our young men. You know, victims are both men and women, but the perpetrators of sexual violence are overwhelmingly men, 95% or above. And in your advocacy work, in your care for Grace, in your care for the family, what are some of the learning lessons that we could sort of push out into the universe in terms of a learning lesson for whether it's older people who are actively having families now, or are younger men? What messages would you like to say to them?
Wow, that's a tough one because there's so much that I want to say. I had the fortune to connect with another dad, Derek Hurley, and Derek's daughter was raped in Antigua while she was going to school there, and she was also raped by a police officer who was on holiday from the UK. And Derek, there's no extradition policy between Antigua and the UK, and so Derek was not going to hear that, and he single-handedly began to work to have this officer face charges for his crime, and ultimately was found guilty and sent to prison. And Derek and I were commenting about this, and we both kind of came to the realization that neither of us were smart enough to know that we couldn't do what we did, right? I didn't know I couldn't change the law. Derek didn't know that he could deal with two countries and without the direct support of the U.S. State Department. I mean, he did it all, but he didn't know better. And I guess the thing is that there was something within us. There was something within you, Alex, that we were activated, and we said, this isn't right. We have to do something. And I think it is, we need more dads, we need more men stepping up and calling out this behavior and saying, this is not right. Too often in this space, advocacy is dominated by women. Well, because they are often, as Alex, as you just mentioned, that they're overwhelmingly the victims of this. Well, this is a men's problem. We need to be part of this discussion, and the Alex, you and the organization focus on educating young men about what consent looks like, and I am focusing on parents and identifying grooming behavior. We're both coming at it from different angles, but we're having discussions that are not nobody wants to have, but have to have. You don't have to change a law. You don't have to do an international extradition to demonstrate support. You don't have to form a nonprofit. You can support your child. You can speak up and speak out against some of the toxicity in our culture today by simply calling out the behavior. It's we have a role to play, and my hope is that if you are in the situation where you have a loved one that has been victimized, that you are not going to take on that shame and want to hide. That if you truly embrace that this is not your child's fault, your loved one's fault, it is entirely the responsibility of the predator that committed this crime. I have nothing to hide. I'm not going to allow the shame and the guilt to consume me. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to call out this behavior. And if I am going to hide in shame, then I am continuing to cede control to this predator, and that's simply not okay. I'm not going to tolerate that.
Well, I feel like after all of this, there must be initially you and other fathers of victims or close ones of victims, would feel such a sense of anger or, sorrow or sadness about what, has happened. But after all you've been through, and I know you said that you didn't even know you were capable of changing a law in your own state. Do you feel a sense of optimism or hope that this issue will be addressed or will be mitigated to some extent? Do you feel that in the near future, this problem, this is going to change?
I have to. I simply have to, because otherwise, what's the point? I'm realistic about it. We just got the law passed last week. It got signed by the governor yesterday. That's a win. We're gonna embrace this. We're gonna celebrate this. But then I got to get started on the next one, because there's always another fight to pick. We are a long way from being where we need to be. And so am I optimistic that I'm going to be able to bring about some change? Yeah. Are we going to solve this problem? Boy, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that, but I have to keep trying. I have to keep pushing forward. I have to model the behavior I want to see out of other men. I have to walk the talk, right? And so ultimately I have to hang on to hope that this is all going to make a difference, and keep pushing, because otherwise this stuff is too hard. It is really hard to do, and if it's not going to make a difference, then why bother? And so I have to. I think we all have to.
And I think that idea of it being hard is something that so many people feel, and that kind of pushes them away from having these conversations. But I think even if they are open to it, let's say they're just open to a one-time conversation, but I think, as we all know, it's so important for this to be a constant conversation, because this is an issue that's not just a one-time thing. And it doesn't just impact a person for a minute, but kind of a whole lifetime. So I would say to you, how do you really encourage these topics and these conversations to be an ongoing thing, even for parents or parent to kid for this not just to be a one-time off event, but really to be this constant communication and conversation between parents and between kids to really encourage this next generation to build up and have that optimism that can be realistic for the future.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to the gym, right? If I go to the gym this afternoon and I work up a sweat and I throw some weights around, am I going to be physically fit and buff and all that? Yeah, probably not. It's going to take some consistency, right? It's going to take some effort. I have to make a commitment. So whether it's going to the gym or it's advocacy, I have to repeatedly, I have to wash, rinse, and repeat, right? I got to keep doing it. And again, I have to model the behavior that I want to see in others. And so I have to be willing to step out into that scary part and into that space of unknown and say, yeah, I'm not okay with this. I'm going to do something about it. And I would like you to help me. I'd like you to be part of it, or I'd like you to do this in your area, or do something. But and again, maybe it's not advocacy, but it's simply calling out behavior. That's the scary part of stepping up, kind of like what you gentlemen are doing. It's pretty easy to simply blend in with the woodwork and go along with some of the popular stuff in our culture today. But the really brave step is calling out that behavior and saying, yeah, no, not okay. And so I applaud that, and I encourage all of us to be doing that. This is just how I am doing it. And Alex, the work you have done, that's how you're doing it. My friend Derek doing his advocacy. This is just what we're doing, but we're modeling the behavior that we want to see in others. None of this stuff is easy. None of this stuff is comfortable, but it is necessary. And it's got to start with me. We are the only people that we can control, and we have to be willing to step out into that space.
Wow. So Chris, you just said something so profound, right? It starts with each one of us, and modeling that behavior is so key. I think that is at the core of it. I'm going to throw this back at my co-hosts now. All right, you guys have just finished junior year of high school. You each have really interesting things going on this summer in continuation of modeling that behavior, right? But tell me, and maybe a message for, our boys who are listening to the podcast. What are your takeaways from what Chris has said? And how does that sort of feel given, you've just completed a very difficult year of high school. You're about to step into sort of the leadership positions of being seniors in your school. What are you guys feeling after hearing this conversation?
Well, I think that one term that we kept going back to and Chris kept on going back to, of validation. And I think that is so key, because so many people, when they want to support their friends, and me and myself, I've had like, oh, I'm here for you, like you got this, but not really validating, because being in someone else's shoes and feeling like you can relate to someone, I think for me that has been very powerful in my own conversations and relationships with people. So I think the idea of validation and actually being able to connect to someone is what can really, really transport relationships and make someone feel like other people are there for them and it's okay and it is going to get better. And by validating, I think that is one important thing that I think everyone should really try to do when they want to support others, and not just think of themselves first, but always kind of think of the other person first and have those actions, as you said, Chris, in the mind of the survivor or in the mind of your friend, but not yourself first, but instead your friend first, to really help them because they're the one who you want to help, not yourself.
So, Chris, I feel definitely a sense of admiration for your commitment to your work. You know, although the college application process isn't the same thing as your daughter being sexually assaulted, you know, we have to commit to certain things in life, and we have to commit to progress and change. So, you know, taking this with me just for the rest of my life, even, I have to make a commitment to the things that I want to do, or that I love, the people I love. You know, I feel like you've really made change and you've really made progress in this, and that comes from, you know, not only your optimism and love for your optimism for change, your love for your family, but also your commitment and your drive and ambition for change. So I think I'm going to take that with me, definitely as inspiration, just going forward generally in my life. And thank you for that.
So I recently heard from someone who fits the profile of someone who's very well regarded in society, financially well off, fancy job and big position, and highly formed opinions, say to my wife that advocacy never works. And that being said out loud to a family that has dedicated itself to advocacy was a overwhelming statement, and it knocked us for a little bit of a loop. And hearing your story here today, Chris, and seeing what Grace and your family have been able to achieve gives me hope, because you guys took a horrible situation with what was done to your daughter, and you used the love and power that exists within your family, and you did the hard work, you modeled that behavior, and you brought real change and improvements in very concrete, measurable, tangible ways. So you have shown the world that advocacy works, and it can be done from normal people who are fighting trauma, who are fighting through difficult things where the easiest thing would be to do what everyone is telling you to do. Hide, be silent, you know, live in your silence and isolation. And I am so grateful for I want to express gratitude on behalf of the entire universe for people like Grace, right? Who are just such strong beings. And, you know, for, I think, all of our daughters who fight through life every day, despite all the things that are stacked up against them. And you guys being willing to speak up, because Chessie and our family also acknowledge our privilege, right? And there's so many people that don't have that ability to be believed, heard, and seen easily, who have to suffer through a lot more hardship. And we are doing this work for everybody. And so thank you. I know this episode has sort of re-energized, you know, me. To our audience out there, look up HB 355 in Pennsylvania. Take a look at what the McGhee family has achieved. If you're energized to take this language or check out your own state, reach out to Chris McGhee at chrismcghee.com, I think is your website, Chris. It's amazing work being done. And I've seen efforts like this, Chris, go national, right? Because every state in our union has idiosyncrasies that are just, if you look at it through the lens of survivors, you just see how much structural work we continue to have. So I want to say thank you for being on our podcast. Thank you for your work as a dad, and thanks to your family and Grace for, changing the world. So turn it to you for any last words.
Wow. I do have to say that if someone were to say advocacy doesn't work, that's more of a reflection on them. Is the bill or the law perfect that we did? No, it's not. But it is movement. It's progress. It's a step forward, and all of us have that ability. You don't have to change laws. You don't have to do public speaking. You don't have to do those things. We all have the capability to do something. And sometimes it is just as simple as calling out inappropriate behavior and commentary, but all of us can do it. And so it's up to us to be brave and step forward and do it. And I am grateful for opportunities like this to not just share our message, but to be able to connect with other people that other men that are saying, yeah, nope, this is not okay. And it gives me hope, and that's why I can continue to do what I'm doing, because I know it's resonating, it's connecting with people, and for me that's been huge for the healing. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to connect with you gentlemen and share our message and keep fighting.
Wonderful. Well, that wraps up another episode of Aspire. We have taped this in the summer season, and I think it will be released some point in the near future, where I think a lot of families will be on the road, on vacations, driving around the country, or possibly even parents taking their kids to visit colleges. And I know I have a lot of great memories of being on road trips with my daughters, showing them schools around the country, but being able to have conversations and being able to establish that connection. And at the end of the day, this is a podcast about connection and the importance of connectivity and the importance of love, care, and support. And there's so many opportunities for us to show that. I think Chris's work is just a representation of that, manifesting itself through the lobbying and advocacy. But I know for my co-hosts, Hugh and Gabriel, this is a labor of real love to connect us with other people in our culture, to just hear what is truly important. So thank you to our audience, and please like and subscribe. You can check out our podcast on Apple and Spotify, and we certainly hope that we get you to sort of listen, learn, and then convert that into action. So many thanks, and we look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcasts on all platforms. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends about Aspire. Follow us on social media at I Have the Right To. Learn more about our student and executive programming at our website at ihavetherightto.org.